The snow had been falling for so long that the world seemed carved from white silence, a silence so heavy it pressed on the lungs of anyone who wandered too far into it. And on the 5th day of their suffering, when Mary Patterson dragged herself and her daughter through that endless storm, she felt as if the sky itself had abandoned them. The wind clawed at her face, slicing her cheeks raw as she clutched little Emma, whose small body shook violently from cold and hunger because nothing, not even desperation, could keep the child warm anymore. And Mary knew that if she didn't find help soon, the snow-covered road would become their grave. Their cabin had run out of food days earlier. The woods had become too frozen to forage. And when Mary's husband Henry failed to return from hunting, she realized with a terror that made her stomach twist that he wasn't coming back, that something out there in the wild had swallowed him whole. And now her only choice was to push through the blizzard to town, praying someone would pity them before it was too late. She was shaking so badly she could barely keep hold of Emma, whose tiny arms wrapped around her neck with the weak grip of a child slipping out of consciousness. And Mary could hear her daughter's breathing, thin, whimpering, fading like a candle at the end of its wick. Each step felt like wading through deep water. Her legs numb, her lips cracked and bleeding, her dress stiff with frost. And still she forced herself forward, because a mother's stubborn hope is sometimes stronger than the storm itself. Though Mary's hope had nearly been crushed when the first group of townsfolk ignored her, desperate pleas, turning away as if hunger was contagious or compassion too costly, she stumbled toward the river road, where the snow fell in thick curtains, and saw shapes ahead, dark coats, hats, boots, all watching her but unmoving, and her heart hammered with both fear and relief because she didn't know yet which one they might bring. She fell to her knees in the snow, Emma whimpering as her bare feet brushed the ice, and Mary lifted the cracked bowl she had carried from home, the last thing left that hadn't broken or burned, holding it out toward the nearest figure, a tall man kneeling down to meet her eye level, his brown coat dusted with snow, his black hat shielding a face creased with concern. She didn't know his name, didn't know anything, except that he wasn't walking away like the others, and with what little voice she had left, she whispered the truth that weighed heavier than the cold. We haven't eaten in 5 days." Saying it out loud broke something inside her. The shame, the fear, the desperation bursting into a trembling sob as she pushed the bowl toward him like an offering, like a surrender, hoping he might understand that she had nothing left, not pride, not strength, not even the luxury of choosing dignity over survival. The wind howled between them as he stared at her, eyes softening, jaw tightening with the kind of anger not directed at her but at the world that allowed a mother and child to suffer like this. And then he said words so gentle they nearly warmed the air around them. "Come home with me." For a moment, Mary didn't move, didn't believe, didn't trust that such kindness could be real after everything she had endured. Emma cried weakly, clinging to her mother, and Mary's fingers tightened around the bowl, as if fearing the man might change his mind. But he didn't. He reached out, lifting Mary to her feet with care, wrapping his coat around her shoulders, picking Emma up in strong arms that felt steady like the earth beneath them. As he walked them away from the staring townsfolk, some ashamed, some indifferent, some whispering Mary's name as though she were a spectacle and not a human being, the man introduced himself simply as Daniel, a rancher who lived on the outskirts where the land stretched wild but honest, where neighbors helped one another without needing praise or credit. Mary tried to speak, but her lips felt frozen, so instead she leaned into the warmth of his coat, her heart pounding with a mixture of exhaustion and newly sparked hope. She noticed the way he glanced at Emma with a softness that suggested he'd known hardship himself, and something in his steady stride made her believe, for the first time in days, that Emma might live through the night. The wind bit at their faces as Daniel guided them along the riverbank, promising that his home wasn't far, that he had food and blankets and a fire, burning strong enough to chase the cold from their bones. And Mary wanted to cry again, not from despair, but from the shock of kindness that felt like a miracle, in a winter meant to take her life. Behind them, the town remained silent, the people returning to their routines as though they hadn't witnessed the moment a starving mother was rescued from death. But Mary didn't look back. Her eyes were fixed on the path ahead, on the flicker of hope Daniel's words had ignited. The ranch, he said, was a place where no one was turned away hungry, where he carried on his father's belief that a man's worth was measured by how he cared for those who needed him most. And though Mary didn't know his story yet, she sensed something unspoken beneath his calm exterior, a grief, a burden, perhaps a loss of his own. Snow continued to fall in thick flakes, swirling around them like tangled threads of fate. And Mary felt something she hadn't felt in weeks, safety, or at least the beginning of it. When they reached Daniel's ranch, a sturdy wooden house nestled beside a barn, its windows glowing gold against the twilight. Mary nearly collapsed from relief. Daniel pushed the door open, and warmth poured out, wrapping around her like a blanket. He set Emma by the hearth gently, as though she were his own child, then handed Mary a cup of broth so hot she nearly cried just holding it. As she sipped, feeling life seep back into her trembling limbs, she watched Daniel tend the fire, his movements quiet, practiced, kind, and she realized that this moment, this stranger's compassion, this flicker of warmth in a world frozen by indifference, was the first step in a journey she never expected to survive. She didn't know yet how deeply Daniel's kindness would change her life, or how their fates had collided for reasons neither of them could yet understand. But she would remember the sound of his voice in the snow for the rest of her life. "Come home with me." And for the first time in days, Mary dared to hope that home might still. Morning light spilled gently through the ranch house windows, warming the room where Mary and Emma slept. For the first time in what felt like years, Mary woke without the bite of cold gnawing at her bones. She sat up slowly, her body still aching from the days of hunger and fear, but her heart beating with a fragile new hope. Emma lay curled beside her, cheeks flushed with returning life, breathing softly as though the storm outside no longer had any power over her. When Daniel stepped quietly into the room carrying a tray of soup, bread and warm milk, Mary felt her eyes sting with grateful tears. He set the tray down and told her gently that they could stay as long as they needed, that no one in his father's home had ever been turned away hungry or afraid. As they ate, Emma smiling weakly between bites, Mary felt a tremor of disbelief. How had a stranger shown them more kindness in a night than the entire town had in years? Over the next few days, the blizzard raged, but inside the ranch, Daniel's steady presence filled the rooms with safety. He fixed broken shelves, fed the animals, chopped wood, and always checked on Emma as though she were his own child. Mary couldn't help noticing the loneliness in his eyes, the quiet sorrow of a man who had lost someone, and she later learned that his wife had died 2 winters ago, leaving him with an empty house and a colder heart than he ever admitted. But as time passed, the warmth returned. First in Emma's laughter, then in Mary's tired smile, then in the small moments when Daniel lingered by the fire simply to sit with them. When the storm finally cleared, Daniel offered Mary a choice: return to town where no one had helped her, or stay at the ranch where life could begin again. Mary looked at Emma, then at Daniel, then at the land stretching wide and open like a promise waiting to be kept. With a trembling but certain voice, she chose to stay. And in that moment, the suffering of the past 5 days became the doorway to a new life, one built not from fear, but from kindness, courage, and the unexpected grace of a stranger who had said the words that saved them both. "Come home with me,"